Welcome to Stewards of Success podcast. I am Brent Mikosh, joined always by my partner at the Wealth Stewards and co-host Jeff Breeze. Jeff, good to see you.
Hey, Brent, let's go.
Let's do it. My guest today walked into one of the oldest, most change-resistant industries in America and decided to rewrite it from the inside out. I'm talking about the steel business. This is Jeremy Flack. He's founder of Flack Global Metals. He founded this business in 2010 with just 3 employees. Brought a lot of disruption by using financial markets to hedge in an industry that had been particularly averse to that. And based on that idea, has grown his business now to be nationwide, now also I believe in Europe, and one of the top 30 steel service center businesses here in the United States. But what I think I'm looking most forward to with our conversation, Jeremy, is I know you well, talking about your entrepreneurial journey, talking about everything it took you to get from where you began in 2010 and before that to here. So let's start with this. Let's get to the origin story. You didn't grow up in the steel business at all. When you look back at your childhood, was there anything back then that would have led you to believe that you would end up in the industry you're in right now?
Absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
End of show.
The entrepreneurial journey, for most of us, isn't necessarily clear. I certainly didn't grow up wanting to own my own business. I wanted to be in business. I grew up in the 80s where there were the new concept of the yuppie, which was young urban professional. And to me, growing up in a small town in Ohio, a farm town, that appeared to be pretty sexy and cool. And then you had all the great corporate raiders of the 80s and all these big personalities in the news in movies like Wall Street and things when I was growing up. And I just wanted to be in business. I wanted to be in the game. And so, I think for a lot of entrepreneurs, how you end up expressing that, it could be anything. So for me, it could have been steel, it could have been plastic, it could have been tech, it could have been anything. I ended up using the steel business as a medium for my own creativity, and I happened to become drawn to it because it's at the base of the economy. And from a pretty early age, I was really interested in money and financial markets, and so it allowed me to grow in ways and to pursue knowledge through the medium of the steel business, because there's dirt, and then there's steel, and then steel is everywhere throughout the world. So it's a global product. It's produced everywhere. It's consumed everywhere, and so for me, the journey, never saw myself to be in steel. Never saw myself as necessarily wanting to be an entrepreneur. I'm an accidental entrepreneur, but found entrepreneurship to be the way I can express my own creativity.
Now, outside of obviously what you experienced in the popular culture in the 1980s, was there anybody at that young age that really impacted you and led you to believe in yourself or got you excited about business in a way that pop culture alone didn't do?
I mean, besides Gordon Gekko.
Oh, literally, I was going to say.
My uncle was a very successful personality in Hollywood, worked at a lot of big networks. And so he was my outlet to the world. He, growing up in a small town before the internet, the view on the world was pretty narrow. But he was my outlet to realize that the world is out there somewhere. So, and almost jealous of kids today because they have such a view of things that wasn't part of our growing up in the 70s and 80s, and their understanding of their context, isn't something that I had as a kid. But what I did do as a young person was I tried really hard at everything that I did, and I wasn't necessarily very good at anything. There were no. Been thinking about this a lot lately. We just had the 16th anniversary of our company yesterday, so it was Mother's Day plus the 16th anniversary of the founding of our business. And people have had more confidence in me along the way sometimes than I've had confidence in myself. We see a lot of personalities, entrepreneurs, but they don't. They talk about their teams, but certainly in certain moments, people around you have more confidence in you than you have in yourself. And I talked about that with my team in a post yesterday on a Slack post. There were a few of us that sat around in a circle in the spring of 2010, and the other 2 folks that were in the meeting, they're still with me in my company, and they had more confidence in me at the time than I did to start this business. But I don't think I look back and I had no athletic talent. I was not good at sports. I was so bad at t-ball that they put me in the outfield, and I couldn't even get on base. Couldn't hit the ball off the tee to get on base. I was on the B relay in a little town swim team. I had no physical talent. I didn't do very well in school. I didn't have a lot of friends. I wasn't cool. I got angry about it.
Yeah.
I became upset that I didn't have a talent. And so my talent became learning and learning how to apply myself and looking for ways to do things and to overcome what I felt was basically like a handicap's the wrong word, but I didn't have any advantages. I wasn't the kid blessed with a lot of physical talent to go to be on, the football team and to be the star quarterback. Like, no way, I could have never done any of that. So desire and then developing, short, quick beliefs in yourself. And I wanted to be part of the world, and then I became that.
That's really interesting. I want to go back because I'm curious. Like, naturally, of course, you called everybody in to work yesterday on Sunday instead of spending time with their mothers, right, to celebrate the anniversary. That's way more important than Mother's Day. No, I'm just kidding.
Well,
How do you celebrate that milestone, though? I'm just curious, like on a weekend, you set a post. Do you wait? Like, how do you champion with your team a milestone that's significant? Because as we all know, not all entrepreneurs make it to year 16. So what is success in sharing that milestone yesterday mean to the team, and how do you do it?
so our company is now we're the merger of a lot of different companies over the years. So we have done M&A work since 3 years after founding the business. And so our team now is a hybrid bloodline of all these companies that we've bought and new folks that have come into the team. So the anniversary is really only important to a few of us anymore.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
And so it's more of a personal thing for me.
Yeah.
And that through the journey, we've made it through, startup phase. We're kind of entering 3.0 phase in our company right now. And so for more, I think it signifies perseverance, because to your point, the odds are really bad.
Yeah.
Anybody, if you really took the odds into case before you start a business, you shouldn't start a business. It's a really horrible idea.
Yeah.
And so showing the team that there was a few of us that believed in this at the beginning, those few of us are still here pushing the dream. I think it's just a quick leadership note. We don't want to celebrate these things too much because it becomes nostalgic in a negative way. I've seen a lot of owners where the business becomes about the owner's journey or the founder's journey. And it's just not that cool for people. I think making it about them and their journey, it resonates more, and it's reality. I mean, there's no point in. I mean, I was in a legal mediation in February on a 7-year-old employment law case, and absolutely can't stand the guy who sued us back in 2019, and he can't stand me. And we started this mediation. The mediator said, "Okay, Jeremy, are you here to settle this case today?" And I said, "Yes." And he said to the other gentleman, "Are you here to settle this case?" And he said, "Yes." So the mediator, then he said, "Look, if you mean it, then you will stop thinking about everything that got us here today. And you will think about what life looks like for you. If we don't settle this case today, what happens next week, the week after? How's 3 weeks in Cook County Court feel to you in Illinois?" And so especially now we've done all this M&A work, and we have new personalities. If I look at my management team, there are 8 of us on the team, 8 or 9. Only 2 of us are from my company, Flack Global Metals. 1 of us is from a company called Paysetter we bought a year and a half ago. Everyone else are from other companies that we've recruited and hired and brought new folks into our team. So how can they really care about what was going on 16 years ago? It's not germane. What's important is, what are we doing tomorrow and next week? And all of the people say to me in our company, "Well, you've been so successful, we're so successful, we have had so much success." And I said, "Well, I don't feel successful." And they don't understand that. And I say, I'll feel successful when I'm working with a group of people and I look at them and I think they are successful. And so that's what we're striving for, and we're looking forward. So Jeff, we don't spend a lot of time celebrating
that might be one of my favorite answers to a question so far in this series. Just that, entrepreneurship, 1, isn't for the faint of heart, as proven by your story and others we've heard. But 2, the amount of ego check at the door that has to happen, right, on a regular basis, that never, like, it's unspoken. And so I applaud you for that, because we struggle sometimes with, like, what are the right milestones to celebrate, and what are just days that are going to be like others. So I think that capture you just had is a great answer.
Yeah, and to your point also, I think that the journey's never really ending, and so you can celebrate in a small way maybe things that you've accomplished today, but that's not the end goal. You got to keep looking forward. I do want to get back. I think your genesis of you ending up in the steel industry is an important one, because you started in banking. So you did not start a steel distribution company, because these are basically companies that have been around for decades. In many cases, they were family-run businesses, and you came in from the outside. What was that original banking career? What was the entree into steel from your banking career?
That's a great question, Brent. My origin story is interesting. If you look at invention, it's just people building upon either their experiences and the experiences of others. Edison would say, well, I couldn't have developed a light bulb unless so many other things had been done first, and we wouldn't have the flat screen phone but for a lot of technologies that were invented before it. So I started at PNC Bank in Pittsburgh in the early 90s, and as an analyst for the bank, for a credit analyst, analyzing opportunities, credits for them to lend. And one of the first projects I was put on was to investigate something called Nucor Steel, which is now the first or second largest steel company in the United States, and one of the best run companies in the world, period. And they had just started making flat rolled steel, which looks like a big roll of toilet paper and weighs 45,000 pounds. And the bank had lent to all of the legacy Pittsburgh, the old steel industry in the United States. And then here comes this thing, Nucor, with an entirely new way to make these steel coils. And it was only a 4-year-old technology back in the early 90s when the bank was starting to be concerned, would this disrupt all of the companies that we have exposure to? And so I got assigned to a small group of people, and they tasked us with understanding the technology and would Nucor impact their client base. So we did a study, and we kind of said, yes, it will. It's going to be a big deal. Then I got assigned to the real estate group to be a corporate lender in real estate, and all my clients were in Chicago. And there was a large real estate developer in Chicago that was bidding to, or had gotten the contract actually, to build the new trading floor for the Chicago Board of Trade, which straddles LaSalle, 2 buildings over LaSalle Street in Chicago. And so I got the opportunity to do the loan, essentially the construction loan. So we had to underwrite the loan, and as part of underwriting the loan, the bank needed to understand, well, how does the Chicago Board of Trade make money? And will they be able to pay for this, what was a $95 million project at the time, and that's 35 years ago, so now I don't know, $500 million today or whatever it would be to build it. And so I studied the Board of Trade, and I had a finance degree from college, but you'd spend a week, what's a future, what's an option, and then you move on to the next thing. But I was shocked with what exists in Chicago insofar as the depth and age and sophistication of the derivatives markets. And I became personally just really interested in it and ended up going down my own research path that had nothing to do with the credit, but I just was super curious about it. So fast forward 5 years, and I left the bank, ended up taking a couple detours, went to business school, ended up in the steel business. And when I walk into the steel business, replicas of Nucor had been built. 5 of them had been built. A company called Steel Dynamics had been founded, I believe, in 1993. It is now a $25 billion market cap steel company. I personally have been buying steel from Steel Dynamics every single month of my entire career, starting in 1998. One of the best companies in the world in steelmaking, and as well in the United States. So the mini mills, as they're called, so Nucor, Steel Dynamics, and many others, were built. In the 5 years, things that were ideas had become reality in the industry. So that's one observation for me: is wow, we were right about our analyst report that this is disruptive. And right behind it, after I started, the big mills began to go bankrupt. So Bethlehem Steel, legendary American steel company, it started out in the armaments business in the 1800s and became one of the largest flat roller steel companies in the world. All the buildings in New York City built before about 1975, all the beams in those buildings came from Bethlehem Steel, the legendary companies, right? And there was a cascade of bankruptcies and failures, began in There were failures in the 80s, but then there was a real big wave in the late 90s and early 2000s, and a lot of that was blamed on foreign competition, but really it was mini mills disrupting that integrated steel mill model. The other piece that I noticed was that the industry had no ability to lay off any risk, and yet financial services, base metals, interest rates, energy, ag, all of those markets lay off risk in the derivatives market through futures and options. And it was just an observation at the time, wow, they don't lay off any risk. Everyone's a long-only play in distribution. So the producers are essentially long raw materials, short their sale price. The distributors are essentially short their sale, long the thing that's on the ground. And on. There's risk to transfer throughout the chain all the way to the OEMs, and the OEMs were essentially short, waiting for inputs to come in at whatever price they came in at the market. Wasn't a big deal because the market didn't move around very much. The volatility was so low that it just didn't rise to the occasion of creating a derivatives contract for the product. So I just observed it, and I kicked off and started to learn the steel business. But with the rise of the Chinese economy and their voracious appetite for raw materials in the late 90s, beginning in the early 2000s, it started to impact the global trade for scrap, for steel, for aluminum, for all commodities. And so as China built in a stair-step manner their production, they would draw raw material from around the world and or push material into the marketplace. Because as you build mills, you don't build them in a linear fashion necessarily, you build them in a stair-step fashion. So millions of tons of production would come online, their economy would grow by X millions of tons, and their mismatches would cause shortages around the world and or surpluses around the world in 2004 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 as they're building what is now 50% of the entire global steel production in China. So if you go back 30 years ago, maybe a little longer, their production was half of what we make in the United States, and now they make half the world's material in total. So that spectacular growth caused enormous volatility in all commodities markets, and it certainly affected the steel industry, but the steel industry had no effective way to lay off risk. And there are many reasons for that, but in the early 2000s, 2002, 3, 4, in 2002 there was a little blip, 2004 outright shortage in America. That caused a lot of interest in a derivatives contract. And so, Brent, answering your question long-winded, but we're on a podcast, so
That's the point.
is that I observed that the whole structure for making the product had changed. And now you had two different methods of production. So you went from one method of production in the 80s, which was called integrated steel manufacturing, which has coal, iron ore, and scrap as its inputs and energy. And then you went to electric arc furnace manufacturing, which is Nucor, Steel Dynamics, and these companies, they remelt scrap. They're recycling companies. The depth and pool of scrap in this country, as we industrialized, so as we tear down buildings, as we recycle cars, dishwashers, if you look at the production base of steel in this country today, it's 85% recycled material. The steel is infinitely recyclable. And what the folks who invented these electric arc furnace technologies saw was a somewhat unlimited or so deep that it's not worth discussing pool of scrap in this country, and using that as a new methodology to make material. And so then as they've refined that process in the last 30 years, it's become very competitive on the virgin, the products. And steel is interesting because, copper is copper is copper. So if you take something called a copper cathode, which is the base thing for making any product out of copper, and you put it in a warehouse, and in 50 years, it's still copper. Set it out in the street, it's still copper. You take a steel coil and you put it out in the street, and in 6 years you have a pile of dust. It corrodes, it oxidizes, it falls apart. Steel is made up of other things. It's a manufactured product. It's not actually a commodity. And so all the difficulty and idiosyncratic things that go along with the fact that it's not truly a commodity because it has fungibility problems, it opened up an opportunity that I saw for the LME and the NYMEX who had been working on a potential hedge for steel to go ahead and pull through it and do it because there was so much need for it. And then I was more of an interested party talking to them in the early 2000s. And then in 2008, perfect timing, fall of 2008, the NYMEX introduced the first hedge for steel coils. And we probably had the great financial crisis and no one traded it. But I saw that as the opportunity to start my company. Yeah. So the foundation, Brent, you pointed this out early in the podcast in your introduction, the foundation of our business was to be the first physical steel company to incorporate the derivative for steel into everything that we do, and we continue that to this day.
Now, when you started the company in 2010, you have 3 people. You've got a contract now that was not, I guess, launched in 2008, but not really trading at all. Did anybody take you seriously in terms of adding the hedging component to your client books of business?
We were 10 years ahead of our time, which is, so first of all, kind of backing up to the origin story, which is I had all these experiences early in my career. Suddenly I ended the steel business. I then learned the steel business, and then at that moment, I'm like, okay, I'm going to take everything that I know. I came from banking. I didn't come from steel. Here comes this contract. I've been working with the LME and the CME to create. It became this. NYMEX was bought by the CME. CME creates a contract. I'm like, I pull. Okay, next step in my career, here we go. Now I know the steel business. Now I know the financial piece. Let's go. Let's make this company. Everybody's going to flock to us. This is going to explode. Dud. First couple of years, the contract barely traded. And then there was a lot of interest in the early teens, and it kind of went away. And by the time I got to the end of 2022, the industry had routed around my business model altogether.
Wow.
So when you're dealing with, you can have the greatest, another entrepreneurial challenge is you can have the greatest idea in the world. And our idea fundamentally is absolutely perfect. But you have these big contingencies in big markets. And disrupting those contingencies is difficult. And those vested interests, they tend to want to protect themselves. You see it in healthcare, you see it in government, you see it all kinds of places. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's not good or bad. It is what it is. So the steel mills themselves, they didn't embrace the steel hedge. If you look at the iron ore market, what kicked off the iron ore market in Asia were the 3 largest mining companies in the world starting to buy and sell futures contracts for iron ore because they viewed it as healthy for their business. So whatever set of reasons there are, the domestic mills here in the United States didn't view the contract as healthy for their business. Okay, there's no reason to pass judgment on it. It is what it is. Yeah. And the OEMs didn't view it as healthy for their business either. So when you have legacy incentives that have been built over 150 years, hard to start changing those behaviors. And so we've been very successful using the tool for ourselves and protecting our clients, but wide scale adoption I thought we would have for our business model by mid 2010s, it didn't happen because the industry routed, and by the end of 22, the ways and means in which the product was being bought and sold had changed so dramatically from when I'd started the business 12 years later that it was making the justification for our business model to almost go away entirely.
Wow.
So we made the choice then to pivot the whole business and begin to buy hard assets, which was hard, manufacturing assets and distribution assets, because we had been quote unquote asset light, which was a thing, back in the early 2010s. Yep. We go back to the themes, asset light, disruptor. I'm like, okay, I'm going to be asset light, so we're going to own the material but not the machines, and we're going to be disruptive because we're going to have this ability to step in between the mills and the OEMs to provide a service. And the marketplace just said, yes, so what?
Yeah. So as you're going through this growth story, though, with FGM, early on, it's always kind of been an acquisition story. So there's organic growth for sure, but you got to present-day Flack Global Metals, as you mentioned, by acquiring many other companies. So in that early stage, what was it? How challenging, or maybe it wasn't, was it to incorporate the different cultures that were present and the leadership in all of these other companies as you're acquiring them, and get them to believe in the mission that you have for the business?
I think I'm a pretty good salesman, Brent. And getting people to come along hasn't been impossible. And I'd say there are a lot of victories and a lot of success stories. We just had a gentleman retire from an acquisition we made in 2024. And he kind of came to the end of his career, but agreed to stay on with us for a couple more years to help. He sold us the business as the president of that company called Pacesetter, and then he just literally, I spoke with him this morning. He retired on Friday, and I'm already calling him saying, hey, I need help on a couple things. So there have been people who elect to move toward the vision. And the vision's kind of cool for us because we're in a really tired space. And so to have a vision for growth, to have a vision for doing it just a little bit differently than everyone else does, to have a founder who's first generation. I'm the only first generation founder on the top 50 service center list in the United States. We are the youngest company on the top 50 list by about 54 years.
Wow.
On average. So we are still, even though I'm in my mid-50s, we're perceived as a young upstart company. It's fairly easy to get people around those ideas. And we've also been good about sharing our success with people that have worked in the company. But there's been a bit of, those that got you here can't get you there. And so a lot of success stories, a lot of failure stories. The company continues to evolve. It's been easy to attract people to the business model just because of the derivatives trade, because it's so different. But in the reality, 95% of what we're doing all day long has nothing to do with it. 95% of what we're doing all day long is servicing customers. Yeah. We're handling high-touch supply chains. At this point in time, the business is very sophisticated in manners in which that it does that. We have hard assets, a lot of working capital. We're a what's it called, a heavy asset, light, low obsolescence building, HALO for you guys in the investment community. But getting people to come along for the ride, I think I've got my daughter, I have an 11-year-old daughter, and she says, Dad, you've got the Riz. So
there you go.
Use a little of the Riz and have a vision, and people want to follow. We're living in a world where people feel detached from things. They're scrolling whatever it is, the next thing, and people aren't going to church. People, community, sense of community. Everybody says the word community. Oh, we're community. No, you're not. There's no community. Nobody talks to their neighbors. Everybody's in their cars. Everybody's living isolated lives, and so having a company that's on a mission to do something, to change things, to be a bit maverick in a staid, kind of a slow-moving industry like the steel business, and we're willing to share our success with the people that work there. I mean, it resonates.
So at the core of it, what Flack Global Metals is doing is you're sourcing the commodity for the end user, whether it's making up the names here, whether it's Maytag or they're making dumpsters or garage doors. You're sourcing at the mills, putting together supply chains, getting the metal to the ultimate client. We've had a lot of big global supply chain disruptions. We had 2018, you have Trump, first round of tariffs. We have COVID is a big one. You've got Ukraine. We've got tariffs round 2 in 2025. Now we've got the Iran war happening. How has that impacted your business? Has that challenge created opportunities, or doesn't it matter?
Well, over time, it's been a net, all of the things that have happened from the tariffs have ended up being a net positive for the value chain in the steel industry in this country.
How so?
Because we had an excessive amount of dumped imported product in this country for a long, long time. And there had been various approaches by administrations going back to Bush administration early. I mean, we've been protecting our steel industry in this country since the Carnegie Steel days in 1880.
Yeah.
And back then it was against dumped British material coming in to our shores. So we have to make steel in this country or we won't have a country. If we have to rely on imported product to build roads and bridges and appliances and cars and houses, we've got a vulnerability there that we don't want to have. And so the tariffs, by and large, although it's been a rocky ride, Brent, and there have been times where we have benefited and it has cost us, profit and loss based upon the machinations in the markets. And it overall is driven value in the chain. And the mills here have been protected from that imported dump material. And what they've done is reinvested back in their infrastructure into more modern domestic production. And so if you look at the U.S. today, we have the most modern, cost-efficient, low-carbon footprint steel mills in the world. And so they've taken the money from the tariffs, essentially, because it created a bit of a gap. So steel in the United States is more expensive than anywhere in the world. And that gap differential has been invested back into the infrastructure in this country. So that's a good thing. The other thing is the import, basically it's a race to zero. So the global importers will sell material to anybody,
Yeah.
and there's no channelization, and things become ubiquitous. And somebody with a pickup truck and someone who has millions of square feet under roof and all the machines to process, they have the same input cost. And so that democratization of that input cost isn't healthy for a market. And what it does is it hurts the distribution stream, makes it hard to make money, makes it hard to reinvest in your platform, hurts the origination stream, which is the mills, makes it hard to reinvest in your platform because it's just a coil. A steel coil made in Asia and a steel coil made in the United States are exactly the same thing for all intents and purposes of this conversation. So we can't create an AI feature on a coil of steel or a skid of steel, okay? There's no plug, you can't ask it a question, all right? It is what it is, it's a commodity. And we've seen what's happened with rare earths, which is that we're very dependent on China for rare earths. I think this is a good learning experience for the government and for our producers of goods in this country, that sourcing everything all around the world and depending upon these global supply chains is a fallacy. It's just an idea. And as soon as global shipping changes or there's a disruption or America pulls back from protecting global shipping, then good luck with your supply chain.
Yeah.
And so it is creating value, Brent, in the system because it's creating integrity. Make it here, build something out of it here, sell it here. Okay? So there's value now.
Yeah.
Now, as you mentioned, you had this pivot for a while into manufacturing, into being very asset heavy. How has that changed your thinking about the business? Because you lean and sort of early on, but then also now much more asset heavy. Pacesetter acquisition, I think, has added an enormous amount of physical assets to your books. What's the pros and cons of both business models?
Well, fixed overhead is a con for having a lot of fixed assets. But you've got to be relevant in your industry. And we are now relevant with OEMs, and we're relevant with the mill suppliers, and we're relevant, quite relevant in the banking community too, because they like to see that you have control over your business. Our clients, they like it that we can control, their production and their supply. So net positive, positive, positive. What we were when we started the business was what we had to be to get the business started. I had very limited resources. We had an idea. The idea was fine, but it didn't really work. And so, if you look at entrepreneurship, you set out on a path, but you don't necessarily continue down that exact same path as the markets change, demand patterns, everything has changed since I started the company. So we've moved toward what matters, and we've done it with the resources that we have along the way. We could have never bought Pacesetter in 2010. I started my company with my own, we bootstrapped the business. We've never raised any outside equity, and one steel coil now costs about $30,000, and we have thousands and thousands of these things in our inventory. So money and scale and one step in front of the next. If you read what's the Shoe Dog book with Phil Knight, he said that they said, well, you must have had this vision for this global sports and marketing empire, and when you started Nike, and he's like, no, I just wanted to be hanging out with athletes and make shoes, and I had to make a living. Look, I got kind of prior business I was involved in closed. I wanted to try this idea. We've gone further beyond what I ever thought we would be or could be ever. Along the way, rather than take the money out of the business and protect myself and not the business, which I could have done, we've reinvested everything back in the company in order to grow and to build something relevant. So it started as I have an idea and I want to make a living. And it turned into we want to be relevant. And then we weren't. And so then we had to figure out how to become relevant, because then it was too late. In other words, once you get invested and you're really invested like we are, then you burn the ships at some point.
I'm curious. I hear a story here that, could be a Hollywood sort of a script, and it's this vision of this younger man who's sort of kind of listless without any major direction. And then I hear this guy who's got an 11-year-old describing the Riz that he carries today. What are the milestones along the way that transfer a lack of confidence into what you should and currently have, which is this, it seems like a belief in yourself that no matter directional forces, influences, monetary, market dynamics, there's a survival mentality. So are there any stories along the way of like where you sharpened that iron, if you will, or like how does that come about?
Well, a lot of entrepreneurs share an imposter syndrome feeling and a feeling of inadequacy. And I would tell you that it's just recently where I've started to get over some of those feelings. I mean, do I belong here? Am I really successful? Even though I have the trappings of it all, even though I have gone from one employee in an office who wasn't even me when we started the business back in 2010 in a Regis office in Ohio with his own laptop from home because we didn't have payroll set up yet. And from there to now we have 190 employees, 3 facilities in the United States. We're the 28th largest company of our kind. We're the youngest. You still suffer from wanting to become. So it's a balance between being scared to death to fail, not wanting to lose what you've built, yet wanting to continue to be out on the attack and grow. And that mind game goes on with a lot of entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And I have a business coach who I talk to a lot about these things because it's a psychological, you're as an entrepreneur, you're in this psychological warfare, which is you're never, to your point, Brent, complete. Company's never finished necessarily. I'm nowhere near ready to sell the business. We're still in growth mode. We're essentially a startup right now because all the M&A, we just launched a new ERP system. The business is in a state of chaos from the M&A and from the new computer system being implemented. So almost feel like we're a startup again. So you get to these points where you feel a little good about yourself, and then you have to do the next right thing for the business, which causes you to feel not so good about yourself. And then you move through that again. And so then you become something else, and you have to rise if you're certainly going to stay in leadership. And some CEOs step aside and they give the company off to other people because you have to become something new at every stage of the development of your company. You can't stay. The behaviors and the methods that got me here won't get me there. And so I just stepped out. I mean, I just promoted someone to be the president of our business. And the objective is I get out of some of the daily things that I had been doing so that the business can grow because Jeremy's in the way. Yeah. So letting go, hard to do. All these things. So it's just baby steps, Jeff. And I think too much celebrating about success. I don't know. Spending a lot of time with that, it just doesn't do anything for you. My life has changed. I mean, my wife and I talk all the time about how grateful we are for the life we've been able to have. But your life that you have today can be taken away from you at any moment. And so staying present, doing the next right thing, one foot in front of the next. It sounds kind of basic and maybe a little corny, but we've been through some tough times in the company, and in those times it takes a lot of resilience. And then we've been through great, wonderful times, and in those times it's almost as challenging because when things are going really, really, really well, the pressure comes out of the room. You get lazy, at least I do, and you can miss some things. So it's really hard to answer that question.
Yeah, no, it's a great answer. No.
Well, you can always talk about the challenges that any entrepreneur has, but you brought up something very interesting that in many cases, after you've had the big win, and it might not even just be in business, it's in life, that's actually when things get the most dangerous because there's a sense of overconfidence or laziness or both, and you combine overconfidence with being lazy and not paying attention. It's a recipe for some real problems. And I think that's probably the time where it's easiest to feel comfortable, but when you need to be the most wary about where things are going.
I think there's a lot of value in cracking your own code. So all of us have a set of experiences that we grew up with and formed our personalities. So we have whatever we were naturally born with, and then all the socialization that occurred around us, and whatever experiences and trauma or the good and the bad of growing up. And then you get hardwired into behaviors. If you can get to a point in life where you actually understand why you behave how you behave, you can be really powerful, especially in leadership. And the most valuable thing, Brent, in those situations where things are really tough or really good, is to understand your behavior set. And I can tell you that my lack of understanding of my behavior set has caused me to make some fantastically lucky good decisions and some fantastically bad decisions. But we've gotten to the point now where we understand that behavior set, me and my team, and now we're doing things to make sure that the behaviors that are productive are reinforced and have a place to go, and the behaviors that aren't, because we all have them, are identified and kept under control, if you will. So I have a behavior where if I feel destabilized, and that could be because we went on a heater and made a big pile of money, that could be because we made some mistakes, that could be because I just feel under pressure. If I feel destabilized for whatever, make up a reason, I tend to make a grand decision. And that could be buying a company, selling a company, hiring someone, firing someone. It could be anything. And because I have so much power, because I am the arbiter of all things in our company, what is that decision?
Yeah.
So knowing that that's the case at this stage of development as we get to 3.0, where I'm completely destabilized. So the computer system, it kind of works. I have a new management team, 80% of which are totally new to our company. We are rebuilding things that Pacesetter was a 48-year-old company when we bought it. We are rebuilding things about our companies and building a way forward. And so I spend every day now in a completely destabilized entrepreneurial startup type environment. And I felt myself in the last couple of weeks wanting to make a grand decision.
A gesture to show.
No, it's more a solve. It's more like, if I just do this, all this other things will be solved. And they won't be. It'll just create more problems probably. And so again, I think if someone's watching this and they watch it or listen to it and they take up the entrepreneurial side of it, I'd say my number one piece of advice is to try to crack the code on your own habits, values, decision-making. Like, crack your own code. Don't crack mine. It doesn't matter. But crack yours. It takes a lot of work to understand why you make the decisions that you make. It could be getting married. It could be anything. Why are you making the decision? If you can develop that kind of an awareness and that kind of mindfulness about why you're performing what you're performing, why are the words coming out of your mouth? What are the writings that you're writing? Why are you deciding to do X or Y? Why? If you know that, you got the keys.
So if I'm a listener and I hear that and it lands, which I think it should, that's a huge insight. My follow-up question to you is, okay, what's the first step on that path? How would you're consulting to me as a young startup. Right. How do I do that? Do I just make the mistakes and then course correct? Do I hire a coach like you have? What do you think is the first key to getting that door? At least get the key in the door before you can unlock it.
So we all have a story we tell ourselves. So we have our life, and then we have the story we tell ourselves about our life. And they're not necessarily the same thing. If rumination's a bad thing, I would love to go back to high school, for example. I think high school was the most fun time. I can never go back to high school, right? And I can't be upset or look at the decisions I made in the past that were wrong decisions and bash myself over the head about it. It's not going to help anybody. But what I can do is try to learn from patterns. And so I would just say, what are your patterns? Start to really understand your patterns. Your career decisions, your personal life decisions, your value decisions with your money, your friendships, the dysfunctions in your life, and understand them, because you're taking part in something. And instead of feeling it, start to look at it. Start to try to learn what your patterns are. And there's a lot of tools out there to do that. I mean, AI is a great tool to use to start to begin to investigate your patterns if used kind of correctly. There's all kinds of tools that you can reach to find. But I'd say go on that journey it will help your entrepreneurship, certainly. It'll probably help your investing if you're going to invest your money. It'll probably help you in many ways. You can retard max and you can just kind of go through life, or you can take a look and try to figure out why and become aware of yourself. And if you do that, you just get all kinds of strength come from that.
That's great.
It's a hard path to go down, though, because I think that a lot of people that I've met, many have a self-destruct mechanism that kicks in, and that particularly can happen, when things are going too well. Not everybody, but many do. For others, particularly entrepreneurs, there's a massive amount of thrill seeking, chasing that next big thing. And to the extent that you know what your triggers are and you can get some handle and get some control over that, to your point, it's incredibly powerful to have that. It's also incredibly hard to do that much self-reflection on yourself because you may find some things you don't like. And you've got to acknowledge that and accept that and figure out how you're going to live with that. So I think that, but to your point, I think it's a...
Well, and as an entrepreneur, you're going to make some terrible decisions. I mean, what's the best batter in MLB is hitting 350 or whatever.
Yep.
You're going to make some terrible decisions. And so you can lament the terrible decision, or you can figure out why you made it. And it's kind of, and Brent, yeah, a lot of us are thrill seekers. I'm a thrill seeker. I mean, I've jumped off of it. I've smoked it. I've whatever in my life and raced it, whatever. Okay.
Yeah.
I've been jumped in crevasses in Alaska. I've raced mountain bikes. I've driven fast motorcycles. I've gone on a racetrack. I've skied down steep
But you
mountains.
said you
Whatever.
weren't an athlete. These are all athletic pursuits.
I'm
You've done
not
it,
good
man.
at any of it, but I try this stuff. So it's more. I'm a total thrill seeker. I'm a complete adrenaline junkie. Why?
But now,
Why?
but now you have to balance that out with you got a young family. Mentioned an 11-year-old daughter. I can relate to that, having an 11-year-old son as well, and Jeff can as well with a couple kids. You now have the stakeholders in your life that are bigger than FGM, that are bigger than the business. So how do you balance the personal life with growing the business and making sure at some point there's going to be compromises on everything? It just depends on the season you're in. But how do you balance that out now?
Very personal question. And so I would say that I have an incredible support system at home because what I do is work-life balance is a hard thing for me because I can never, as an entrepreneur, you cannot turn off, at all. And you guys know this. You guys have your own business, and your mind never stops. So I'm on a 7-day work week. I have been for 16 years, and my wife and daughter, they understand that and they support that, and so we work our family around the business because it gives us life. It is what we are and what we have. And so I'm fortunate that I have that support system. And it's for me and the way I'm wired, it's a big part of my success. I would say that the two biggest reasons for success, my own success and the company's success, number one, we're in the United States of America. It's the greatest system in the world. It's the greatest country in the world. There's more opportunity here today than anywhere else in the world, period. And then my support system at home. And so, for me, I have what I need to get back to things. We had a very tumultuous year last year. We collapsed 2 companies together. We sold off divisions we didn't need. We had a really tough year, and it all came to a conclusion in February. And I sat my wife down and said, I promise you that it won't be that rocky in the future. And she said, you just do what you have to do. I can handle
What
rocky.
an awesome endorsement.
Now, she's nasty. She puts you right back out on the street, man. She's so I think you have to have support. We don't do any of this alone. The people in leadership that don't really understand that they're in service to others, they start to get on the, I say this is not the Jeremy Flack show. It's not what this company's about. It's not what my house is about. So I think, eating a little humble pie and making sure that those around you feel supported is important, and finding your own support system. I mean, look, Elon Musk has 60 girlfriends and 80 illegitimate children, and he makes it work, and he's happy, and figure out what works for you. And, my lifestyle and the way I've done it is just I found a way that I feel supported and that I have a purpose every day. And if I leave work, maybe where I know we're kind of coming to the end, close to the end of our time. If I leave work every day and I feel like I have a sense of opportunity, that the company has an opportunity, that I have an opportunity, nothing better in the world. And that's, as people, we need a purpose.
Absolutely.
And your purpose could be anything. But if you generate that purpose and you grow that purpose, it can be really rewarding. I'll say of the ups and downs of our business, I don't have any regrets. I didn't set out to do this on purpose. I'm an accidental entrepreneur, and we didn't really get into that story, but that's for another time. And seizing the day every day, it's it's an awesome way to live.
Now, in these conversations, going to fire some quick questions at you. One-word answers, first instinct. No wrong answers here. What are you most proud of?
My marriage.
What is your definition of success?
Successful people around me.
Is there a piece of advice that no one gave you when you were younger that you wish they had?
Understand your habits.
What's a belief that you held maybe 10 years ago that you no longer hold today?
That I can do, that if other people can do it, if I can do something, so can others.
Okay. What is something about success that you wish more people understood?
How hard it is.
That was the next question. What did success cost you that people don't see?
It's the edifice looks really easy. I think the world looks at successful people, some part of the world, in a negative light, as if it came easy, as if you scroll a couple things and flip a couple boxes. And the daily struggle of wondering if you're doing the right thing, the times where you get cross purposes with people and in leadership, like I'm in, some relationships that you thought were going to be long-term aren't. Facing the hard decisions, making the hardest decisions, it takes a huge emotional toll on you. And there's all the incentive in the world not to make the hard decision. It's so hard to push through those times.
I think that's a great place for us to end today. Jeff, what are your takeaways on our conversation?
I mean, there's a couple things in life I love. I love transparency. I love candor. And you've provided them both. So to watch you unveil over this time together, more and more of that, as you said, I think we could probably dig in for another 3-4 hours on some of these topics, but that was thoroughly enjoyable. And I think most importantly, a lot of information that hasn't been present in prior episodes, which is kind of the point of bringing new guests on. So I'm super grateful for the time and all that output, because I think it's gold.
I would agree with that, Jeff. And Jeremy, thank you for all your insight. Again, I echo Jeff in saying thank you for your candor, the honestness of your answers. And for those of you that have enjoyed this podcast, like it, subscribe to it, recommend it to a friend. And so on behalf of my partner, Jeff Breeze, and Jeremy Flack, and myself, thank you for joining us today on the Stewards of Success podcast. And we'll talk to you again in the future.